Thomas Harrington stared at the calendar on his office wall, the red circle around today's date catching his eye as it had all week. 30 years. 3 decades of marriage to Ellen, the woman he'd fallen for during his final year of college, when she'd been a bright-eyed teaching assistant in his literature course. He smiled, thinking of the surprise he'd arranged. Ellen thought they were simply having dinner at Giovanni's, their favorite Italian restaurant. She had no idea about the private room he'd reserved, or that their children and grandchildren would be waiting there, or about the anniversary gift tucked in his desk drawer, a diamond pendant that had cost more than he'd ever spent on jewelry before. Thomas checked his watch. Just after 3. He could wrap up his work early today, head home to change, and still have time to pick up the flowers he'd ordered. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter, Melissa. "Everything's set for tonight, Dad. We'll all be there by 6:30. Can't wait to see Mom's face." He texted back a quick thanks, then began organizing the papers on his desk. At 62, Thomas had scaled back his hours at the architectural firm he'd helped build, but he still kept busy with select projects and mentoring younger architects. Ellen had retired from teaching 2 years ago, and they'd been talking about traveling more, maybe buying that lake house they'd always dreamed about. His phone rang, Ellen's ringtone. He picked up with a smile. "Hey, honey." Thomas leaned back in his chair, disappointment washing over him. "Ellen, it's our anniversary. The reservation's been set for weeks." A pause. "I know what day it is. I just can't make it tonight. We can go tomorrow instead." "The kids are coming?" he said, his voice hardening. "They've arranged their schedules. Some of them are driving in from out of town. What could possibly be more important?" Thomas felt his temperature rising. Diane was Ellen's friend from her book club, a divorcee who, in his opinion, had been a negative influence since entering their lives 3 years ago. "You're canceling our 30th anniversary dinner for book club?" Thomas sat there, staring at his phone in disbelief. In 30 years of marriage, Ellen had never forgotten their anniversary. And now she was blowing it off for Diane? It made no sense. He called Melissa, explained the situation, and asked if they could postpone the celebration. His daughter sounded as confused as he felt, but agreed to contact everyone. Thomas then called Giovanni's to cancel the reservation, the manager's disappointment evident in his voice. By the time Thomas drove home, his confusion had morphed into simmering anger. Their house, a 2-story colonial they'd bought 25 years ago when the kids were small, was quiet when he entered. Ellen's car wasn't in the garage. He went upstairs to their bedroom and noticed Ellen's closet door ajar. The black dress she'd bought last month, the one she'd said was for their anniversary dinner, was gone from its hanger. So she had remembered. She was just choosing to spend it with someone else. Thomas sat heavily on the edge of their bed, trying to make sense of it all. On impulse, he reached for Ellen's iPad on her nightstand. She'd never been particularly tech-savvy, and often asked him for help with her devices. He knew her passcode, their wedding date. He opened her messages, feeling a twinge of guilt that quickly dissipated when he saw a thread with Diane near the top. He tapped it open. Diane's reply: "Perfect. Robert can't wait to see you. He says to wear that black dress that drives him wild." Thomas felt as though he'd been punched in the stomach. Robert? Who the hell was Robert? He scrolled up through months of messages, his hand shaking as the truth revealed itself in fragments. "I told Thomas I'm at a teaching conference. We'll have 3 whole days together at the lake house. Zlee. Sometimes I wish I could just leave, but I can't hurt Thomas like that. And what would the kids think?" Thomas set the iPad down, his mind reeling. Ellen, his Ellen, was having an affair. And not just a recent indiscretion. Based on the messages, it had been going on for at least a year. He thought about their life together, raising 3 children, supporting each other through career changes and health scares, planning for a retirement they'd enjoy together. Had it all been a lie? Had she been unhappy all this time? "I come." Thomas picked up his phone and opened the tracking app they'd installed years ago when the kids were teenagers. They'd kept it active mostly out of habit, and because it was useful when trying to meet up in crowded places. Ellen's dot was moving along the highway, heading north toward the Lake District. The drive took nearly 2 hours, during which Thomas alternated between rage, heartbreak, and a strange, detached calm. He followed Ellen's location to a small cabin nestled among pine trees, its windows glowing warmly in the gathering dusk. A silver Audi was parked beside Ellen's car in the gravel driveway. Thomas parked on the road and approached on foot, his heart hammering. Through the front window, he could see them. Ellen and a man he didn't recognize, perhaps in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair, sitting close together on a sofa, wine glasses in hand. As Thomas watched, frozen in place, the man leaned in and kissed Ellen, his wife, his partner of 30 years, and she responded with an enthusiasm that made Thomas's stomach turn. He should confront them. Pound on the door, demand explanations, perhaps even take a swing at this Robert character. That's what the wounded husband was supposed to do, wasn't it? Instead, Thomas took out his phone and snapped several photos through the window. Then he returned to his car and drove to the nearest town, where he checked into a motel for the night. He couldn't face the long drive home in his current state. In the sterile quiet of the motel room, Thomas finally allowed himself to break down. He sobbed like he hadn't since his father died, great heaving cries that left him exhausted. When the tears finally subsided, he lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, trying to decide what to do next. His phone buzzed with a text from Ellen. "Sorry I missed dinner. Got caught up with Diane. We'll be home tomorrow. Love you." A casual lie, the "love you" tacked on at the end. It was all too much. Thomas didn't respond. Instead, he called his old friend and college roommate, Michael, who picked up on the third ring. "Listen," Michael said, his voice gentle but firm. "Don't do anything tonight. Get some sleep if you can. We'll talk tomorrow and figure this out. You're not alone in this, Tommy." After hanging up, Thomas took 2 of the sleeping pills he kept for occasional business trips and fell into a mercifully dreamless sleep. The next morning, Thomas woke to several missed calls and increasingly worried texts from Ellen. He ignored them all and drove home, arriving mid-afternoon to find Ellen's car already in the garage. She met him at the door, her face a mask of concern. "Thomas! Where have you been?" "I've been worried sick." He walked past her into the living room, then turned to face her. "How was your evening with Diane?" Thomas pulled out his phone, brought up one of the photos he'd taken, and held it out to her. "You forgot our anniversary to be with him. 30 years, Ellen. Didn't that mean anything to you?" Ellen stared at the photo, then at Thomas, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Finally, she sank onto the sofa. "How did you find us? Does it matter?" Thomas's voice was eerily calm, even to his own ears. "How long has this been going on?" 18. Thomas cut himself off, the magnitude of the deception hitting him anew. "Who is he?" "He's a professor at the university. We met at a faculty retirement party." Ellen's voice was small. "Thomas, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen." "But you let it happen. Over and over again." Thomas paced the room, unable to stand still. "Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to keep lying indefinitely?" "I want you out of this house," Thomas said, his voice hardening. "Today. Pack whatever you need for now. You can arrange to get the rest later." Ellen stood, her eyes wide. "Thomas, please. Can't we talk about this? 18 months is nothing compared to 30 years. 18 months of lies," Thomas shouted, his composure finally breaking. 18 months of making a fool of me? Did Diane know? Did anyone else know? "Get out," he repeated. "Go to Robert. Go to Diane. Go wherever you want. But I can't look at you right now." Ellen started to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. She went upstairs, and Thomas heard drawers opening and closing as she packed. He sat in his armchair, staring blankly at the family photos arranged on the mantelpiece, smiling faces that now seemed to mock him. When Ellen came back downstairs with the suitcase, she paused in the living room doorway. "I'll stay with Diane for now. I really am sorry, Thomas." After the door closed behind her, Thomas sat in silence for a long time. Then he went to his office, took out the diamond pendant he'd bought for their anniversary, and locked it in his safe. Maybe one day he'd give it to one of his daughters or his granddaughter. But the thought of Ellen wearing it now made him sick. He called Michael, who offered to come over with a bottle of scotch. Thomas accepted gratefully. Bethas. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Thomas told their children what had happened. A conversation that ranked among the most difficult of his life. Melissa and her younger sister Sarah were furious with their mother. Their son David was more measured, suggesting that perhaps there were issues in the marriage that Thomas hadn't recognized. "Don't defend her," Melissa had snapped at her brother. "Dad didn't deserve this." Thomas appreciated their support, but hated seeing his children in pain. "Your mother is still your mother," he told them. "Whatever happened between us doesn't change that." Ellen moved in with Robert after just a week at Diane's. Thomas learned through Sarah that Robert had left his wife around the same time, so they were making a go of it. These two people who had blown up their families for each other. Thomas wondered if they would be happy, if it would be worth all the destruction they'd caused. He consulted a divorce attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who laid out his options clearly. Given Ellen's infidelity and the length of their marriage, Thomas was in a strong position. But he found himself reluctant to use the affair as leverage, despite Patricia's encouragement. Patricia frowned. "You're entitled to be angry, Thomas. You don't have to make this easy for her." "I'm not doing it for her," he replied. "I'm doing it for me, for my kids. I want to move forward." In the end, they agreed on a straightforward division of assets. The house would be sold, and the proceeds split. Their retirement accounts would be divided equally. It was all very civilized on paper, though the process of dismantling 30 years of shared life was anything but. Thomas threw himself into work, taking on more projects than he had in years. He rented a small apartment near his office, and filled it with just the essentials, leaving most of their shared possessions for Ellen to deal with. He went through the motions of daily life, eating, sleeping, working, without really engaging with any of it. His friends worried. Michael and his wife invited Thomas over regularly, making sure he wasn't isolating himself completely. His colleague Janet, a widow in her 50s who had always been kind to him, began bringing him homemade lunches, claiming she always cooked too much for just herself. 2 months after the separation, Thomas was having dinner at Michael's when his friend broached a subject Thomas had been avoiding. Thomas nearly choked on his wine. "I'm 62, and in the middle of a divorce. Who exactly would want to date me?" Michael's wife Karen rolled her eyes. "Plenty of women, I'd imagine. You're successful, you're in good shape, and you're not a jerk. That puts you ahead of about 80% of the available men your age." "That's fair," Michael conceded, "but don't close yourself off to the possibility. Ellen made her choice. You deserve to be happy too." Thomas nodded noncommittally, but the conversation stayed with him. Was there a future for him beyond this limbo of anger and grief? Could he trust anyone again after such a profound betrayal? 6 months after discovering Ellen's affair, Thomas attended a charity gala for the local children's hospital. His firm had designed their new wing, and he'd been invited as a guest of honor. He went alone, dreading the inevitable questions about Ellen's absence. To his surprise, the evening wasn't as uncomfortable as he'd feared. Many attendees were business associates, who either didn't know about his personal situation, or were tactful enough not to mention it. He found himself actually enjoying the conversation, and the sense of accomplishment, as the hospital director praised the design. During dinner, he was seated next to a woman named Catherine, a pediatric surgeon in her late 50s, with striking gray eyes and an easy laugh. They fell into conversation naturally, discussing everything from architecture to their favorite hiking trails. Thomas realized with a start that he was flirting, or at least what passed for flirting at his age, and even more surprisingly, Catherine seemed to be flirting back. As the evening wound down, Catherine handed him her card. "I've enjoyed talking with you, Thomas. Perhaps we could continue the conversation over coffee sometime." Walking to his car afterward, Thomas felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in months. It wasn't that he was ready for a relationship. Far from it. But the interaction had reminded him that he was still alive, still capable of connection. When he arrived home, he found an email from Ellen. They had communicated only through their lawyers since the separation, so seeing her name in his inbox gave him pause. The message was brief. "I'm clearing out the last of my things from the house this weekend. The realtor says we have a good offer. I found some old photos of you with your parents that you might want. Let me know if you'd like me to set them aside." The business-like tone, the mundane details of their uncoupling, it all felt surreal. This woman had been the center of his world for most of his adult life, and now they were discussing real estate transactions and photo albums as if they were distant acquaintances. Thomas replied with equal brevity, thanking her for thinking of the photos and confirming that yes, he would like them. He was about to close his laptop when impulse took over. He added, "I hope you're well, Ellen." It wasn't forgiveness. He wasn't there yet, might never be, but it was an acknowledgement that despite everything, he didn't wish her ill. That had to count for something. Ellen's response came quickly. "I'm managing." "I hope you are too. You deserve to be happy, Thomas. I'm sorry I couldn't be the one to make that happen." Thomas closed his laptop without replying further. He took out Catherine's card, looked at it for a long moment, then placed it on his bedside table. Tomorrow, perhaps, he would call her. Tonight, He would allow himself to feel the complex mix of grief and relief that seemed to define this new chapter of his life. As he prepared for bed, Thomas caught sight of himself in the bathroom mirror. The man looking back at him was older, wearier than the one who had excitedly planned an anniversary surprise just 6 months ago. But there was something else there too, a resilience he hadn't known he possessed. 30 years of marriage had ended in betrayal, but Thomas Harrington's story wasn't over. Not by a long shot.